January 12, 1944. The skies over northern France were gray, heavy with low-hanging clouds. A formation of Luftwaffe fighters cut through the chill morning air, engines roaring, confident in their superiority. Below them, the rumble of Allied bombers approached, escorted by a small squadron of P-47 Thunderbolts. To the German pilots, these new American fighters looked bulky, slow, almost comical compared to the sleek Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs they had mastered. They laughed, they taunted. "Easy prey," one radioed, barely concealing his arrogance. But the Thunderbolts held secrets the Germans could not yet imagine. 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, each capable of unleashing a torrent of lead, were hidden behind the aircraft's unassuming frame. The pilots gripping the controls were not rookies. They were trained, disciplined, and ready to turn underestimation into annihilation. As the distance closed, the laughter faded. The first bursts of fire ripped through the sky, tearing metal and shattering confidence. In that moment, the skies themselves seemed to roar with sudden, undeniable power. The day the Luftwaffe mocked the P-47 would become a lesson written in scorched wings and smoke. By early 1944, the air war over Europe had reached a critical juncture. The Allies, preparing for the full-scale invasion of occupied France, were ramping up strategic bombing campaigns to weaken German industry, transportation, and morale. The United States Army Air Forces, USAAF, had committed thousands of heavy bombers, the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator, to daylight raids over Germany and northern France. These missions were costly. Luftwaffe fighter formations prowled the skies, intercepting bombers with lethal efficiency. The casualty rates among unescorted bombers were alarming, and the Allied command knew that success depended on a new generation of fighter escorts capable of both endurance and firepower. Enter the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Developed in the late 1930s and entering service in 1942, the Thunderbolt was a radically different design from the nimble, lightly armed fighters favored in Europe. Weighing nearly 8,000 pounds empty, with a robust radial engine capable of absorbing heavy damage, the P-47 was built like a flying tank. Its 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns, mounted in the wings, could unleash devastating fire, a capability unmatched by most contemporary German fighters. Early assessments labeled it awkward and slow to maneuver, but these observations failed to account for the plane's true strengths: speed in a dive, durability under attack, and sheer firepower. American pilots, many fresh from training bases in Florida and California, were initially cautious with the Thunderbolt. The aircraft's size and weight required precise handling, particularly in close-quarter dogfights. Yet its performance at high altitudes, where escort missions often took place, was exceptional. The combination of long-range capability and survivability made it ideal for protecting bomber formations on deep penetration raids into German-held territory. By late 1943, the P-47 was being deployed in increasing numbers across England, integrated into the 8th Air Force and 9th Air Force, ready to meet the Luftwaffe head-on. The Luftwaffe, by contrast, believed they retained superiority in the air. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s dominated the skies over France and the Low Countries. German pilots were trained rigorously from a young age, drilled in aggressive attack patterns, and often flew over their home territory with intimate knowledge of defensive and offensive advantages. When they spotted the first formations of P-47s accompanying bombers, initial reports described them as clumsy and ineffectual. Many Luftwaffe pilots underestimated the Thunderbolt, assuming its size and ungainly appearance would make it easy to outmaneuver or destroy. This miscalculation was amplified by the operational realities of 1944. The Germans were stretched thin across multiple fronts, tasked with defending not only the Reich's heartlands, but also the occupied territories of France, the Netherlands, and Belgium.
Experience in previous engagements had made them confident against lighter, less powerful American fighters. Intelligence reports on the Thunderbolt were incomplete. Few Luftwaffe commanders had witnessed the aircraft in full combat. In their eyes, these new American planes were a minor nuisance, unlikely to disrupt formations of seasoned bomber crews. Yet beneath the steel skin and massive radial engine of the P-47, the Allies had engineered a weapon perfectly suited to exploit the Luftwaffe's overconfidence. The aircraft's 8.50 caliber machine guns, capable of firing 2,000 rounds per minute in total, could shred enemy fighters within seconds. Its reinforced airframe allowed it to absorb multiple hits, while a turbocharged engine gave it a tactical edge in dives and high-speed passes. For American commanders, the P-47 represented a shift in doctrine. No longer would bombers face annihilation without effective, heavily armed escorts. For German pilots, the coming encounters would be the first time their assumptions met the unforgiving reality of modern air power. This tension set the stage for the events of January 1944, when the P-47s first began to encounter large formations of Luftwaffe fighters during bombing raids over northern France. What seemed at first like an unremarkable deployment and easily dismissed by overconfident enemy pilots would soon prove devastating. The Germans, laughing at the sight of bulky American planes in the sky, were about to discover the Thunderbolt's deadly capabilities firsthand. The seeds of shock and disbelief were sown in these early missions, laying the groundwork for a dramatic shift in air combat over Europe. The contrast between expectation and reality would define the legacy of the P-47. Where the Luftwaffe saw vulnerability, the Americans had built resilience. Where the Germans assumed weakness, the Allies had concentrated overwhelming firepower. These early encounters, seemingly small at the moment, would culminate in decisive confrontations where the laughter of enemy pilots was silenced by the violent effectiveness of the P-47's 8.50s. And as these first skirmishes unfolded, both sides were unaware that the balance of power in the skies of northern France was about to be rewritten forever.
As 1944 progressed, the skies over Europe were a constantly shifting battlefield. The Luftwaffe, once the undisputed master of these airways, now faced a growing challenge: increasingly sophisticated American aircraft and tactics. Bomber raids, once lightly escorted, had become heavily defended formations, and German pilots were beginning to encounter fighters they had not fully anticipated. The P-47 Thunderbolt, in particular, was reshaping the rules of engagement. The P-47's operational philosophy differed sharply from the German approach. Where Luftwaffe doctrine emphasized agility and aggressive dogfighting, the Americans favored firepower, endurance, and coordinated formation flying. Thunderbolts were deployed not only to protect the bombers, but to dominate the airspace around them. Squadrons flew in tight, disciplined formations, their pilots trained to maximize the devastating potential of the 8.50 caliber machine guns. The Germans, watching from above, initially dismissed these planes as slow and clumsy. This misjudgment proved fatal. Escort missions required precision and coordination. Thunderbolts would accompany bombers for dozens of miles over hostile territory, maintaining altitude and positioning while scanning for enemy interceptors. The pilots knew that a single lapse could allow German fighters to penetrate the formation and inflict catastrophic damage. Yet, the P-47's design offered unique advantages: a turbocharged engine capable of sustaining high-altitude performance, heavy armor shielding the pilot and critical systems, and exceptional diving speed for tactical strikes. Every engagement was a test of endurance, skill, and nerves. From the Luftwaffe perspective, the challenge seemed manageable. German squadrons relied on surprise, superior maneuverability, and the assumption that American pilots were inexperienced. Reports from early encounters suggested that many enemy pilots remained confident. Some even radioed mockery: "The Americans are slow. We will cut them down before they reach our bombers." Such arrogance reflected the broader strategic context. Germany was fighting on multiple fronts, and its pilots were trained to dominate the skies. Their confidence was rooted in years of success, yet it blinded them to the evolving threat the Thunderbolt represented. The technological contrasts were stark. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s excelled in turning dogfights, relying on agility to outmaneuver opponents. The Thunderbolt, in contrast, was less nimble but heavily armed, able to unleash concentrated fire and withstand punishment. Early combat reports highlighted the durability of the P-47. Aircraft returned from missions riddled with bullet holes, yet remained airworthy. This resilience forced the Germans to adapt their tactics, often with little success. Meanwhile, American pilots quickly learned to exploit the Thunderbolt's strengths. Formation flying emphasized mutual support, with pilots covering one another's blind spots. High-speed dives allowed Thunderbolts to initiate surprise attacks, while their armament could decimate enemy fighters before they had a chance to react. The combination of planning, firepower, and endurance began to tilt engagements in favor of the Allies, even against veteran Luftwaffe pilots. Training and leadership also played a decisive role. The USAAF invested heavily in preparing pilots for long-range missions. Officers drilled them in formation discipline, gunnery accuracy, and situational awareness. Missions were meticulously planned. Routes over France accounted for terrain, expected enemy positions, and weather patterns. By contrast, German pilots were often reacting, relying on instinct honed over previous years of fighting. The result was a subtle but crucial advantage. The Thunderbolts were not only physically formidable, they were part of a system that leveraged preparation, discipline, and firepower simultaneously. By January 1944, the stage was set for confrontation. Thunderbolts escorted bombing missions across northern France, facing German formations that underestimated their effectiveness. Initial encounters revealed the Germans' fatal mistake, underestimating both the aircraft and its pilots. Reports from these skirmishes noted German shock as American fighters, previously dismissed, tore through formations with overwhelming speed and accuracy. In one engagement, a squadron of Thunderbolts inflicted disproportionate losses, demonstrating that the clumsy fighters were in fact deadly instruments of air superiority. The strategic importance of these early encounters cannot be overstated. Each engagement tested tactics, exposed weaknesses, and forced adaptations on both sides. For the Allies, the Thunderbolt became a symbol of technological advantage combined with tactical precision. For the Luftwaffe, the initial laughter at the bulky American fighters began to fade, replaced by urgent reassessments and increasing caution. What the Germans had believed to be minor nuisances were quickly proving to be a decisive factor in the air war. By the end of these initial missions, the P-47 had earned a reputation that would echo across Europe. The combination of pilot skill, aircraft durability, and concentrated firepower made the Thunderbolt a weapon the Germans could no longer dismiss. And with each mission, the psychological impact grew. Enemy pilots who had laughed at the sight of these American planes were now beginning to understand that their underestimation would carry deadly consequences. This foundation of context, technology, and strategy leads directly into the angles section, where we will examine the story through human, tactical, technological, leadership, and enemy perspectives, each adding depth to the unfolding drama of the P-47's dominance. At first glance, the P-47 Thunderbolt seemed almost comically large. Its massive fuselage and thick radial engine contrasted sharply with the streamlined Messerschmitts that German pilots were accustomed to. But beneath this imposing exterior lay a machine built for one purpose: dominance in the air. The 8 50-caliber Browning M2 machine guns mounted along the wings were not merely supplementary armament, they were the Thunderbolt's signature weapon. Each gun could fire 850 rounds per minute, combining to unleash over 6,000 rounds of high-velocity lead in a single minute of sustained fire. Its durability was equally remarkable. The aircraft could absorb substantial enemy fire and still remain operational. Engines often continued running even when punctured multiple times. Hydraulic systems and control surfaces had redundancy built in, giving pilots the confidence to press attacks even under intense fire. This technological advantage meant the P-47 could dive at speeds exceeding 430 miles per hour, a velocity German fighters struggled to match in similar attacks. In dogfights, the combination of firepower, armor, and speed transformed perceived weaknesses into lethal strengths. The P-47's effectiveness was inseparable from the men flying it. American pilots were carefully selected and rigorously trained, often enduring hundreds of hours in simulators and actual combat scenarios before escorting bombers over enemy territory. Beyond technical proficiency, pilots developed an instinctive understanding of the aircraft's strengths and weaknesses. They learned to anticipate enemy maneuvers, position their planes for optimal firing angles, and exploit the Thunderbolt's durability to take risks that would have been fatal in lighter fighters. These pilots also carried a psychological edge. Coming from varied backgrounds from the heartlands of Kansas to the streets of New York, they shared a determination to protect the bomber crews, many of whom were unarmed and vulnerable. This mission-driven mindset instilled a sense of unity and purpose that amplified their combat effectiveness. When the Germans laughed at the clumsy P-47s, they were not facing machines alone. They were facing men trained to turn every perceived flaw into a tactical advantage. The tactical doctrine surrounding the P-47 was revolutionary. Unlike previous escort fighters, which often strayed from bomber formations to seek individual kills, Thunderbolts were instructed to maintain tight formation discipline. Pilots flew in overlapping boxes, each aircraft covering blind spots for another. This created a protective shell around bombers, making it exceedingly difficult for Luftwaffe fighters to penetrate the formation without exposing themselves to concentrated fire. Dive attacks were another key tactic. Pilots would climb above the enemy, then dive at high speed, using gravity and engine power to increase firing velocity. The dive allowed the P-47 to strike first, retreat, and repeat, minimizing risk while maximizing damage. This tactic capitalized on the P-47's ability to sustain high-speed dives without structural failure, a capability the Germans often underestimated. The combination of formation discipline, dive tactics, and concentrated 50 caliber firepower allowed small numbers of Thunderbolts to dominate engagements with numerically superior enemy formations. The success of the P-47 was not accidental. It was the product of deliberate strategic planning. USAAF leadership understood that long-range bombing missions were only viable if escort fighters could maintain superiority over enemy airspace. Commanders emphasized technological investment, pilot training, and tactical innovation. Squadrons were organized with meticulous attention to coordination, timing, and intelligence. Leaders at all levels reinforced the psychological dimension of combat. Pilots were encouraged to understand their opponent's assumptions and use them against them. German overconfidence became a weapon in itself. By allowing enemy pilots to underestimate the Thunderbolt, USAAF commanders created conditions in which the first moments of engagement could deliver decisive advantage. These calculated risks, coupled with superior communication, mission planning, and squadron cohesion, amplified the P-47's battlefield impact. The combination of technological superiority, pilot skill, tactical doctrine, and strategic leadership created a multi-dimensional advantage for the Allies. Where one element alone might have been impressive, the integration of all four made the Thunderbolt a game-changing instrument of war. The Germans' laughter at its appearance was not only premature, it was fatal.
From the Luftwaffe pilot's seat, the P-47 appeared oversized and ungainly. Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf pilots, trained to dominate through agility, assumed that these heavy American fighters would be easy prey. Reports from early encounters suggested that German pilots considered the Thunderbolt's large radial engine and thick fuselage liabilities rather than assets. They approached with confidence, often flying into optimal firing positions under the assumption that the American pilots would struggle to respond. This misjudgment was compounded by overconfidence in their own aircraft. German doctrine emphasized energy fighting, climbing, diving, and maneuvering to exploit speed and agility. Against lightweight American fighters, these tactics had proven effective. However, the P-47 did not behave like a conventional opponent. Its dive speed exceeded expectations. Its guns could unleash torrents of fire that German pilots had not anticipated, and its reinforced airframe allowed it to absorb punishment that would have downed a lighter plane. The combination of physical resilience and concentrated firepower caught many Luftwaffe pilots off guard, turning what they assumed would be a routine skirmish into a nightmare. The initial laughter and taunts of German pilots gave way quickly to shock and disbelief. Encounters with P-47 Thunderbolts demonstrated that underestimation could have catastrophic consequences. Reports from Luftwaffe pilots described confusion as their formations were torn apart by concentrated bursts of .50 caliber fire, and aircraft they considered inferior held their ground under attack. This psychological impact extended beyond individual engagements. Word of the Thunderbolt's durability and firepower spread through Luftwaffe units, creating a pervasive sense of caution and hesitation. Where once German pilots approached engagements with aggressive certainty, they now faced the psychological burden of doubt. Every dive, every approach to a bomber formation carried the lingering fear of encountering a thunderbolt capable of punishing misjudgment. Overconfidence, once a hallmark of the Luftwaffe, was replaced with unease, a shift that altered the dynamics of aerial combat over northern France. Beyond raw combat capability, the P-47 offered critical operational advantages. Its turbocharged engine provided exceptional high-altitude performance and extended range, allowing it to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, missions that would have been perilous for shorter-range fighters. This endurance meant that American bombers could reach strategic targets with effective protection throughout the journey, drastically reducing losses. Additionally, the Thunderbolt's heavy armament and firepower enabled it to dominate numerically equal or even superior enemy formations. Small squadrons could engage larger groups of Luftwaffe fighters and maintain tactical control. From a logistical perspective, this reduced the strain on Allied resources. Fewer aircraft were lost per mission, and pilots returned with valuable experience intact. The combination of endurance, firepower, and survivability made the P-47 an exceptionally efficient and cost-effective tool in the air campaign, further frustrating German attempts to counter it. When viewed together, these angles, technological, human, tactical, leadership, enemy perspective, psychological, and logistical, explain why the P-47 Thunderbolt became a turning point in the air war over Europe. It was not a single element that made the difference, but the integration of all factors. The aircraft's firepower and durability enabled pilots to execute innovative tactics. Disciplined training allowed them to exploit the plane's strengths fully. Strategic planning from the USAAF ensured missions were optimized, and the German underestimation of the plane amplified the impact of every engagement. The result was a dramatic inversion of expectations. Where the Luftwaffe saw vulnerability, the Allies had concentrated strength. Where the Germans assumed weakness, they encountered lethal efficiency. Every encounter reinforced the lesson. Dismissing the Thunderbolt was a fatal mistake. What began as laughter in the clouds would evolve into a hard-earned respect as German pilots learned, often too late, the true cost of underestimating the P-47. February 20th, 1944. Over the skies of northern France, a B-17 Flying Fortress rumbled steadily toward industrial targets near the Ruhr Valley. They were accompanied by a squadron of P-47 Thunderbolts from the 56th Fighter Group, one of the first units fully equipped with the new aircraft. The weather was cold and gray, visibility moderate, but the Germans were already in the air. Luftwaffe pilots flying Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s spotted the American fighters and assumed they were easily outmatched. The first radio chatter was casual, almost mocking. "Big, slow targets. We'll have fun with these clowns." As the bomber stream advanced, the P-47s maintained tight formation, scanning the skies with disciplined precision. The American pilots knew their roles: protect the bombers, engage any enemy fighters, and exploit the Thunderbolt's strengths. Lead pilot Lieutenant Johnny McGowan, a veteran with hundreds of hours in training and previous combat sorties, held the formation with steady hands. His squadron flew in overlapping boxes, wings slightly angled to cover each other's blind spots, a formation designed to frustrate the Luftwaffe's expected attack patterns. The Germans made their move. A flight of 8 FW-190s dived toward the bomber formation, banking to approach from the rear. Confidence was high. The pilots anticipated a routine engagement against aircraft they still considered sluggish and vulnerable. But as they closed, the P-47s shifted with remarkable speed. The Thunderbolts dropped into a coordinated counterdive, their radial engines thundering as 8.50 caliber machine guns opened fire in unison. The sky erupted in tracer streams, each round finding its mark in the unsuspecting German planes. Within seconds, the first FW-190 was engulfed in fire. Smoke trailed from its fuselage as a pilot attempted evasive maneuvers. Another aircraft, caught in crossfire, spiraled downward. The remaining Luftwaffe pilots hesitated, shocked by the intensity and precision of the attack. The Thunderbolts exploited this hesitation, diving and climbing with a combination of speed and firepower that defied the Germans' expectations. The sky, once a theater of casual overconfidence, became a crucible of chaos. Lieutenant McGowan maneuvered his aircraft along the edge of the engagement, selecting targets with careful calculation. His gunnery, combined with the Thunderbolt's firepower, tore through enemy formations. Tracer rounds laced the gray clouds, punctuated by bursts of black smoke from damaged aircraft. For the Luftwaffe pilots, each second was a lesson in the danger of underestimation. Those who had laughed at the appearance of the P-47 now struggled to survive against its overwhelming offensive capability. The Thunderbolt's armor proved decisive. Several planes returned from the engagement with over 50 bullet holes in the fuselage, yet pilots remained unscathed. German attempts to target vital systems minimized results. The P-47's robust construction, combined with disciplined pilot tactics, allowed the Americans to sustain offensive pressure without significant loss. This durability transformed the encounter from a defensive escort mission into an offensive demonstration of aerial dominance. Meanwhile, German command in the sky radioed frantic instructions. Pilots were ordered to regroup, attempt coordinated attacks, and avoid unnecessary losses. But the Thunderbolt's tactical deployment anticipated such maneuvers. Covering fire, overlapping formations, and high-speed dives prevented the Luftwaffe from reorganizing effectively. By the time the Germans recognized the magnitude of the threat, 2 of their aircraft had been destroyed, another heavily damaged, and morale was eroding rapidly. This engagement marked a decisive moment. The Luftwaffe's laughter at the P-47 had transformed into urgent alarm. Where once overconfidence had guided their actions, shock and hesitation now dictated every move. The American pilots, leveraging superior technology, training, and tactics, had turned what was assumed to be a routine encounter into a catastrophic lesson in underestimation. As the engagement intensified, the P-47s pressed their advantage with relentless precision. The American pilots executed dive and climb maneuvers, exploiting the Thunderbolt's superior high-speed dives and reinforced airframe. Lieutenant McGowan's flight led the assault, while wingman Lieutenant Henry Hank Phillips and Lieutenant Robert Bob Wallace covered the bomber formation's flanks, ensuring no German fighter could slip through unchallenged. By mid-engagement, the Luftwaffe squadron was in disarray. One FW-190 spiraled into a smoke-filled descent after sustaining multiple hits, its pilot ejecting under duress. Another Messerschmitt Bf-109 caught tracer fire along the wing route, forcing an emergency retreat back toward German-controlled territory. Within minutes, what had begun as a confident dive attack turned into a chaotic retreat. The German pilots, initially amused by the sight of the clumsy Thunderbolts, now faced a deadly reality. Every hesitation, every misjudgment invited annihilation. The psychological impact on the enemy was immediate. Radio transmissions revealed confusion and fear. Pull back, these planes are too strong." Luftwaffe pilots trained to dominate the skies were now reacting defensively, their previous confidence shattered. For the Americans, this hesitation provided a crucial window to neutralize threats and protect the bomber stream. The P-47's concentrated firepower proved decisive. In a span of 10 minutes, the squadron destroyed 3 enemy aircraft and severely damaged 2 others. Several additional fighters were driven off, their pilots shaken and unwilling to re-engage. The bombers, once vulnerable, now had a protective envelope of firepower, and all reached their targets with minimal damage, a remarkable achievement given the scale and intensity of the Luftwaffe interception. Heroics of individual pilots further exemplified the Thunderbolt's dominance. Lieutenant McGowan, despite sustaining minor wing damage, continued aggressive maneuvers to shield a straggling B-17. Lieutenant Phillips positioned himself between an FW-190 and a bomber formation, firing bursts that forced the enemy to break off. Every action demonstrated not only personal courage, but the synergy of pilot skill and aircraft capability. The Thunderbolt was more than a plane. It was an extension of disciplined, fearless human intent. By the end of the encounter, German forces had suffered their heaviest single engagement losses in this sector in months. Reports later confirmed at least 3 destroyed aircraft, 2 damaged beyond immediate repair, and multiple pilots forced into emergency landings or retreat. American losses were minimal. A single P-47 returned with superficial damage, underscoring the aircraft's durability. For the first time, the Luftwaffe fully grasped the lethal combination of the Thunderbolt's 8.50 caliber machine guns, its reinforced design, and the strategic expertise of its pilots. This engagement became a turning point not just in northern France, but in the perception of air superiority. The P-47's reputation as a clumsy fighter was irrevocably shattered. German pilots, once dismissive, began to approach subsequent missions with caution and respect. For the Allies, this event validated strategic doctrines emphasizing firepower, formation discipline, and pilot training. Bombers could now reach key targets with fewer losses, and air superiority shifted incrementally toward the Allies. The day ended with the Americans returning to base, engines roaring and skies cleared of immediate threat. Reports circulated quickly among the 8th Air Force. The Thunderbolt had proven itself as a dominant force in European skies. Pilots debriefed, analyzing maneuvers, enemy behavior, and the performance of their aircraft. Every detail of the engagement was noted, refined, and integrated into future missions. The lesson was clear: underestimate the P-47 and the cost would be swift and unforgiving. As the sun dipped behind the clouds over northern France, the echoes of that encounter lingered in the minds of both sides. German pilots had entered the engagement with laughter. They left with shock, respect, and a hard-learned lesson in underestimation. The P-47 Thunderbolt had not only protected its bombers, but had rewritten the tactical expectations of air combat. This moment, captured in the tracers and smoke of February skies, marked a new chapter in the Allied campaign, where technological innovation, pilot skill, and strategy converged to dominate the battlefield. The stage was now set for the aftermath, the consequences of this encounter on morale, strategy, and the evolving air war in Europe.
The immediate aftermath of the February 20, 1944 engagement over northern France reverberated across both Allied and German forces. For the Americans, it was a clear validation of the P-47 Thunderbolt's design, doctrine, and deployment. The bomber crews, once acutely aware of their vulnerability, now returned from deep raids with significantly lower casualties. Flight logs noted the incredible durability of the aircraft and the precision of the pilots' maneuvers. A single squadron of P-47s effectively neutralized multiple Luftwaffe fighters, demonstrating that the Allies could achieve a level of air superiority previously thought unattainable. For the Luftwaffe, the consequences were immediate and sobering. Pilots who once dismissed the Thunderbolt as slow and unwieldy were forced to reassess their tactics. Confidence gave way to caution. Reports from German command emphasized the unexpected lethality of the American aircraft and the skill of its pilots. One Luftwaffe briefing recorded that the new American fighters hit harder and survived longer than anticipated, signaling a shift in strategic thinking. The psychological impact of underestimating the Thunderbolt proved as consequential as the material losses inflicted. The engagement also influenced subsequent mission planning on both sides. USAAF leadership integrated lessons from the encounter into training and operational doctrine. Pilots were encouraged to exploit the Thunderbolt's strengths: high-speed dives, overlapping formation protection, and concentrated machine gun fire. This heightened level of preparedness ensured that future bombing raids over Europe would benefit from even greater effectiveness, with bomber losses gradually decreasing as P-47 squadrons assumed a dominant protective role. From a broader perspective, the encounter exemplified the importance of technological advantage in modern warfare. The P-47's combination of speed, firepower, and durability allowed it to achieve results that were disproportionate to its numbers. Where numerical superiority might once have dictated outcomes, the integration of advanced aircraft and tactical training allowed smaller forces to exert control over larger, less adaptable enemy formations. It was a practical demonstration of how innovation could tip the scales in high-stakes aerial combat. Additionally, the encounter highlighted the interdependence of aircraft and human skill. The Thunderbolt's 8.50 caliber machine guns were lethal only because pilots knew how to wield them with precision and restraint. Every dive, every burst of fire, and every defensive maneuver depended on a careful understanding of the aircraft's capabilities and limitations. The synergy between pilot and machine transformed potential vulnerability into dominance, a lesson the Luftwaffe would struggle to counter in subsequent months.
By the end of February 1944, word of the Thunderbolt's performance had spread throughout the UAAF and reached German intelligence units. Mission debriefs, reconnaissance reports, and intercepted communications painted a consistent picture. The P-47 was no longer just an escort fighter, it was a game-changer. Its ability to absorb enemy fire while delivering lethal counterattacks forced German pilots to approach future engagements with renewed caution, fundamentally altering the dynamics of the air war over France and beyond. The clash over northern France had therefore achieved more than tactical success. It shifted the psychological balance, reshaped operational doctrine, and validated the investment in a machine that, until then, had been met with skepticism. The Germans' initial laughter at the clumsy Thunderbolts had been replaced with sober respect, and for many, lasting fear. This moment marked the first step in establishing air superiority that would continue to influence Allied operations for the rest of the European campaign. As reports filtered back to bases in England, the P-47 Thunderbolt's reputation grew as a symbol of American air power and a warning to the Luftwaffe. Its effectiveness extended beyond individual missions, influencing broader strategic considerations. German pilots approached bomber formations with heightened caution, often avoiding aggressive engagements that previously would have been routine.
This psychological shift, combined with measurable losses, forced the Luftwaffe to reconsider attack strategies and redeploy resources to counter a threat that could no longer be dismissed. The Allies, meanwhile, capitalized on the Thunderbolt's proven capabilities. Commanders integrated the aircraft into all major bombing operations, using it not only as a protective escort, but as an offensive force capable of dictating the tempo of engagements. Its durability allowed pilots to press attacks with confidence, disrupting enemy formations and inflicting damage far beyond the expectations of earlier reconnaissance reports. The P-47's combination of firepower, speed, and resilience began to tip the scales in favor of the Allies over northern France and into the heart of German-occupied territory. Operationally, the Thunderbolt enabled a shift in Allied tactics. Bombers could now penetrate deeper into enemy territory with reduced risk, allowing strategic targets in industrial regions and transportation hubs to be hit with greater frequency and precision. The aircraft's long-range performance and high-altitude capability meant that escort missions could extend further than before, giving planners flexibility in scheduling and route selection. In practical terms, the P-47 transformed the logistics of air warfare, making sustained, large-scale bombing campaigns both feasible and increasingly effective. The human dimension remained equally significant. Pilots returning from engagements reported that the Luftwaffe morale had begun to waver in the face of the Thunderbolt's dominance. Stories of German pilots hesitating mid-attack, abandoning formations, or retreating entirely spread quickly within German ranks. The effect was cumulative. Overconfidence, once a hallmark of Luftwaffe culture, was replaced with apprehension. American pilots, in contrast, gained confidence not just from their aircraft's capabilities, but from witnessing the tangible results of disciplined training, tactical execution, and the Thunderbolt's formidable firepower. Technological impact also reverberated through the war effort. Engineers and military planners studied the P-47's performance closely, refining aircraft designs and tactical doctrines. The aircraft's ability to absorb enemy fire while delivering devastating offensive strikes became a case study in balancing speed, armor, and armament. Subsequent aircraft developments and combat strategies drew lessons from these engagements, underscoring the broader significance of the Thunderbolt beyond the immediate battlefield. By the spring of 1944, the cumulative effect of the P-47's performance had shifted the balance of air power over Western Europe. The aircraft's presence forced the Luftwaffe to allocate more resources to defense, to revise tactical doctrines, and to approach missions with caution that bordered on fear. Allied bombers, once vulnerable and exposed, now operated with a level of protection that increased mission success rates and reduced casualties. The Thunderbolt had, in essence, redefined the expectations of air combat, proving that a well-designed and well-flown fighter could dominate even in the face of highly trained adversaries. The engagement over northern France, initially a single tactical encounter, became emblematic of this transformation. It highlighted the consequences of underestimating an opponent, the integration of technology and human skill, and the profound psychological effects of unexpected resilience in warfare. What had begun with laughter from German pilots ended with lasting respect for the P-47 and a recognition that the balance of power in the skies was no longer taken for granted. The story of the P-47 Thunderbolt over northern France is more than a tale of aircraft and aerial combat. It is a study in the convergence of technology, human skill, and perception. German pilots, confident in their superior maneuverability and experience, laughed at what they assumed was a clumsy opponent. Yet that laughter, born of underestimation, became a prelude to shock and hard-earned respect. The Thunderbolt's 8.5 caliber machine guns, reinforced airframe, and high-speed dive capabilities turned apparent weakness into decisive strength. This encounter underscores a timeless lesson in warfare. Assumptions, when left unchecked, can be fatal. Overconfidence, even among the most experienced, can be exploited by innovation, discipline, and preparation. The American pilots were not simply machines, they were extensions of strategy, embodying rigorous training, tactical foresight, and the courage to press attacks under life-threatening conditions. Their actions, combined with the P-47's design, reshaped the tactical and psychological landscape of the air war. Beyond immediate tactical outcomes, the P-47 engagements influenced the evolution of aerial combat. They demonstrated that survivability, firepower, and endurance could outweigh raw maneuverability, prompting shifts in aircraft design, combat doctrine, and training that reverberated across the war. The psychological impact on the Luftwaffe, hesitation, caution, and the recognition of an underestimated enemy illustrates how morale and perception can alter the course of campaigns as profoundly as bullets and bombs. In the end, the skies of northern France tell a story of transformation. Where initial laughter once echoed, now there was silence, respect, and acknowledgement of human ingenuity paired with technological mastery. The P-47 Thunderbolt did more than defend bombers. It redefined expectations, shifted momentum, and left a legacy of lessons about courage, innovation, and the cost of underestimating an opponent. This is why history remembers these encounters, not just as battles won, but as moments when perception collided with reality, forever altering the narrative of air power in World War II. If you felt the roar of the Thunderbolt, the fear in the Luftwaffe's eyes, and the courage of the pilots who turned laughter into victory, imagine what more stories like this can teach us. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join us as we uncover the untold heroics, the shocking moments, and the machines that changed history forever. Don't just watch history, feel it.